The Voynich Manuscript, the book nobody can read. In the rare books library at Yale University sits a manuscript that has defeated some of the greatest minds in recorded history. Not obscure academics, not amateur enthusiasts, but the people who cracked Nazi Enigma communications during World War II, such as those at the FBI. Pioneers such as Alan Turing, and now artificial intelligence systems trained on virtually every known human language. All of them have tried to read this book. All of them have failed. The Voynich Manuscript is often called the world's most mysterious book. Created sometime in the early 15th century, it contains hundreds of pages filled with bizarre botanical illustrations, strange astronomical diagrams, naked figures bathing in green fluid, and line after line of writing in a script no one has ever conclusively identified. Not partially translated, not mostly understood, completely undeciphered. No confirmed language, no verified author, no definitive explanation for why it exists at all. But what makes the Voynich Manuscript truly extraordinary is not just what is in it. It is the trail of brilliant, obsessed, desperate people who have pursued it across 6 centuries and still come away with nothing. First, let's establish what we actually know and correct a few things the popular version of this story usually gets wrong. The vellum on which the manuscript is written has been carbon dated to the early 15th century between 1404 and 1438. The ink has also been tested and matches materials consistent with that same period. This is not a modern forgery written on old parchment. The book is genuinely medieval. The manuscript contains around 234 pages, though evidence suggests it originally had at least 272, which means dozens of pages are simply missing. Nobody knows what was on them. They may have contained answers. They may have deepened the mystery further. Either way, they are gone. Some pages fold out into elaborate multi-page diagrams, a rare feature for any 15th century text. This was not a cheap or casual production. Whoever made this invested significant time, skill, and materials. The manuscript is divided into 6 sections based on its illustrations: botanical, astronomical, biological, cosmological, pharmaceutical, and what appears to be a recipes section. Which means this is not random scrawling. There is organization here. There is intentional structure. But what any of it means, nobody can say. Now here is where the story gets extraordinary. The manuscript was not sitting forgotten in a dusty box until Wilfred Voynich found it in 1912. It had an ownership chain, and that chain reads like a cast of characters assembled for a historical thriller. The earliest reference to the manuscript in the historical record dates to 1639, a letter from a Prague alchemist named Georg Barisch to a Jesuit linguist named Athanasius Kircher in Rome. Barisch had owned the manuscript for years. He had been studying it obsessively, getting nowhere, and in desperation he sent a copy of some of the symbols to Kircher, hoping this famous scholar could crack the code. Now, Kircher was not a minor figure. He was arguably the greatest polymath of the 17th century. He was fluent in a dozen languages. He had previously published a celebrated, if ultimately incorrect, decipherment of Egyptian hieroglyphics. If anyone alive could read the Voynich Manuscript in 1639, it was Athanasius Kircher. Kircher was just as unsuccessful as everyone else, but he was hooked and desperately wanted to buy the manuscript. Barisch refused to sell. Barisch died still holding it. He left the manuscript to his close friend, a royal physician and scientist named Johannes Marcus Marci. And Marci, near the end of his own life in 1665, finally sent the manuscript to Kircher in Rome, along with a letter. That letter, tucked inside the manuscript, contained a crucial piece of information. At some earlier point, the Holy Roman Emperor Rudolph II had owned the manuscript, paying 600 gold ducats for it, an enormous sum equivalent to roughly 2 years' salary for a skilled craftsman. Rudolph II was no ordinary book collector. He was an emperor famously obsessed with the occult, alchemy, and mystical objects. He collected astronomer Tycho Brahe, mathematician Johannes Kepler, and every piece of rare esoteric knowledge he could acquire. He believed the Voynich Manuscript contained secrets, and he paid a small fortune for them. But who sold it to him? Recent archival research by Stefan Guzzi of the University of the Arts Bremen identified a record showing that in 1599, a physician named Karl Wiedemann sold a collection described as remarkable rare books to Rudolf, transported in a small barrel, for an amount equivalent to 600 gold coins. This is the only transaction in thousands of imperial account records matching that description and price. The trail may go even further back. Wiedemann lived in the home of a Bavarian botanist named Leonhard Rauwolf, a physician and explorer known for his intense interest in plants and herbal medicine, and began selling books to the emperor immediately after Rauwolf's death. The manuscript may have passed from Rauwolf's estate to Wiedemann and then to Rudolf. A manuscript full of impossible plants and a connection that was difficult to ignore. After Rudolf, the manuscript passed to Rudolf's court pharmacist, Jacobus Horsicki de Tepenech. And here is something remarkable. Horsicki's signature is on the first page of the book, but it is nearly invisible to the naked eye. It was only detected using ultraviolet light. Someone tried to erase his name. Who, why, we do not know. From Horsicki, the manuscript traveled eventually to Barish, then to Marseille, then to Kircher in Rome, then remained in the possession of the Jesuits for centuries. Wilfrid Voynich found it in 1912 while examining a collection of manuscripts at a Jesuit college near Rome, a collection the Jesuits had quietly decided to sell. He described finding it as stumbling upon an ugly duckling, a manuscript unlike anything he had ever encountered. And Voynich himself had a backstory almost as strange as the manuscript. He was a Polish political revolutionary who had been arrested and exiled to Siberia, escaped, eventually made his way to London, and built a career as one of the most respected rare book dealers in the world. He was not a credulous man. He was sharp, commercially minded, and deeply experienced with historical manuscripts. And this book astonished him. He valued it at $100,000, roughly $3 million in today's money. He spent the rest of his life trying to find a buyer and get it translated. He died in 1930 having achieved neither. The manuscript passed to his widow, then to a New York bookseller named Hans P. Krauss, who donated it to Yale University in 1969. That is when it arrived at the Beinecke Library, where it sits today as Beinecke MS 408. So what exactly are people trying to read? The text consists of discrete symbols chosen from an alphabet of roughly 40 characters, organized into what appear to be words of variable length written from left to right. Those words follow patterns. Certain symbols cluster together. Word lengths are consistent, and the text behaves statistically like a real language, not like random noise. In 2013, physicist Marcello Montemurro from the University of Manchester published findings claiming that semantic networks exist in the text, with content-bearing words occurring in clustered patterns and new vocabulary appearing when the topic appears to shift. That last detail matters enormously. In real language, you use different words in different contexts. The Voynich text appears to do the same thing, which either means it encodes genuine meaning or that whoever created it was sophisticated enough to mimic that behavior deliberately. A 2020 handwriting study identified the manuscript as the work of 5 different scribes, 5 people. This was not one eccentric individual hunched over a desk producing an elaborate personal fantasy. Multiple people participated in creating this manuscript, which either suggests a collaborative scholarly project or an organized forgery operation running across multiple contributors. Now for the illustrations. The botanical section is the largest, containing over 100 drawings of plants and herbs, but many of the plant drawings appear to be deliberate composites, the roots of one species attached to the leaves of another, with flowers from a third. This is not ignorance or poor artistry. The individual components are rendered with reasonable botanical accuracy. Someone made deliberate choices to combine them incorrectly. That is a very strange thing to do. If you are recording medical herbal knowledge, you draw the plant correctly. If you are hiding medical herbal knowledge behind code, you might scramble the visual representations to match the scrambled text. Some researchers believe that is exactly what happened here, that real plants and real knowledge lie beneath a layer of deliberate visual disguise. The biological section, the one with the bathing figures, is perhaps the most visually arresting. Naked women in interconnected pools of green fluid flowing through elaborate tube systems. Some figures hold stars, some appear pregnant. Historians have categorized this as the balneological section, interpreted as depicting bathing as a health practice. Medieval medicine genuinely used therapeutic bathing extensively, but the imagery in the Voynich Manuscript goes far beyond any known medieval health manual. The list of people who have seriously attempted to crack this manuscript is in itself a kind of monument to human intellectual ambition. World War II codebreaker Alan Turing attempted it. The FBI investigated it. The world's leading expert in the manuscript has called it the main unsolved problem in the history of cryptography. Among the serious researchers who failed were the renowned husband and wife cryptologists William and Elizabeth Friedman, art historian Erwin Panofsky, intelligence specialists, and scholars from chemistry, law, mathematics, and medieval philosophy. The Friedmans are particularly significant. William Friedman broke the Japanese purple cipher during World War II, one of the most complex cryptographic systems ever devised. He and Elizabeth, herself one of the most accomplished codebreakers in American history, returned to the Voynich Manuscript for decades. They never cracked it. Every proposed solution since has followed the same trajectory. A researcher announces a breakthrough. The academic community examines it. The theory collapses under scrutiny. No proposed translation has gained broad acceptance. Not for 500 plus years. The hoax theory has significant supporters. In 2007, Austrian researcher Andreas Schinner published findings in the journal Cryptologia, arguing that the statistical properties of the manuscript's text were more consistent with meaningless gibberish produced using a quasi-random method than with real Latin or medieval German texts. The proposed mechanism: a forger using a special grid tool to generate nonsense that superficially resembles language patterns. The purpose: selling the manuscript to a wealthy collector willing to pay enormous sums for manuscripts believed to contain ancient secrets. Rudolph II, who paid the equivalent of a fortune for this book, was exactly that kind of collector. One compelling suspect named by some researchers is Edward Kelly, an English occultist and alchemist who worked alongside John Dee at Rudolph's court and had a documented history of fraud. But the hoax theory has a serious problem. Creating meaningless text that consistently mimics genuine linguistic behavior across hundreds of pages, apparently written by 5 different people, would have required a level of sophisticated coordination and technical knowledge that stretches credibility for a 15th century forgery operation. Some researchers simply do not believe it, which brings us to perhaps the most unsettling possibility of all. What if the manuscript was not written to deceive outsiders? What if it was written to protect insiders? The medieval world could be genuinely lethal for people practicing experimental medicine, alchemy, or knowledge that overlapped with what the church considered heresy, A coded manuscript meant only for people who already possessed the key would have served a real protective function. If the key was passed orally through a small circle of practitioners and that circle died out, the manuscript would become permanently unreadable without ever being a hoax. Every page would be meaningful, and every page would be permanently closed. Today, the manuscript is fully digitized and viewable online through Yale's Voynich Library. Researchers worldwide continue studying it. AI systems continue finding patterns that suggest meaning, then losing the thread before producing a translation. The full text of the Voynich Manuscript is available online, courtesy of the botanical library, which means for the first time in its history, anyone in the world with an internet connection can look at every page. And still, nobody can read it. The world's leading authority on the manuscript calls it the main unsolved problem in the history of cryptography, not one of the harder problems, the main one. A book bought by emperors, studied by the people who cracked Nazi codes, analyzed by the FBI and processed by artificial intelligence, and it is still keeping its secrets. Whatever the Voynich Manuscript is, a coded medical text, an alchemical cipher, a manufactured hoax, or a window into a completely lost knowledge tradition, it remains one of the most stubborn mysteries in recorded human history. Sitting quietly in New Haven, Connecticut, waiting for someone or something finally capable of asking it the right question.